I am joined today by Steve.Kuker, who is the founder and president of Senior Care Consulting. Thanks for joining us today.
You bet. Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I've known Steve now, gosh, it was before I was married, which was 1990. So we both had dark hair, just a tad bit younger back in those days. So I've known Steve for 35-ish years now. And
Gosh, yeah.
as part of a new series I'm doing, I think I'll call it the Prosperous Homeowner. I'll be talking with people who have knowledge, business related to building and preserving wealth, etc. Steve has a very unique and I think much needed service that he offers. So, with that, tell us a little bit about what Senior Care Consulting is.
So with Senior Care Consulting, it's very straightforward. We help families and individuals find the right senior care community. That could be assisted living, it could be long-term care. We may need memory care. It could be an all of the above, referred to as a continuing care retirement community that has independent living, assisted living, and long-term care all under one roof. So when it's time to move from your home to a senior care community to receive care at any level, that's the narrow niche that I live in. I like to say it's about 2 feet wide, but it's also about 2 miles deep because we customize the process to each individual that we serve. So that's it. We help people find the right senior care community.
And Steve has a deep background in the healthcare. What are some of the different positions that you did before you
Oh,
started?
yeah, I've been at this for a long time. And I've been the administrator of nursing homes. I've been the administrator of assisted living communities, but I've also operated home care companies where we would send someone to help you in your home for 2 to 24 hours a day, home medical equipment and supplies, IV therapy companies, Medicare certified home health agencies. So if it's in the world of senior care, I've pretty much done not all of it, but most of it.
And let me say now, this is such a broad and deep topic that there's no way we can cover it in a 30 or 45-minute interview. So this will most likely be a 3 or 4 or 5 part series. So as long as Steve's willing to keep coming back, we'll keep doing this and make sure that we get some information to the people who need it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how senior care was started or how this whole thing came about?
You bet. It started with a personal experience and then it grew into a service to help others. Long story short, my grandmother fell backwards. She fractured her neck. Major injury. My grandpa had dementia and she was his caregiver. And so now we're in big trouble. Just like that, everything changed. What did we do with grandpa? I was in charge of finding a place where they could provide care. And remember, I've been an administrator of nursing homes, assisted living facilities, so I knew what to look for. I'm not going to fall for the closest one because usually you don't get that lucky. I'm not falling for the prettiest one because pretty does not provide care. People provide care. And then number 3, I wasn't going to fall for some of these very strong sales tactics. In my opinion, I'm here to interview you. And depending on what I learn, I may or I may not trust you to care for my grandparents. And I had to get it right. I wanted to be thorough. I checked out a number of places and I chose the place that I felt would be the best fit for my grandparents. It was a great fit. They received very good care over the last couple of years of their lives. I thought, I wonder if there are any services that exist in the same way that I help my own grandparents. And I looked around. I didn't see anything like that. And so I just felt like it was a great idea and a great opportunity to help other families in the same way that I helped my own grandparents. And that's how the whole thing started a long time ago.
If some of us are in that situation where we're caring for an aging parent, or perhaps it's a grandparent, and they get to that point where they need that type of help, I don't think most of us would even know what questions to ask. So that's basically where your experience comes in, right? Because you know what to look for, what questions to ask, and basically you know how to focus on what matters, right?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. It's the exact same process that I went through with my own grandparents. Today, I conduct a 97-point inspection and performance audit. I just gather just a wealth of information on the top places meeting my clients' exact needs so that I can turn that into a report and they can really make a decision. My job is to help them make the best decision they can based on objective information.
So walk us through the process. If somebody comes to you and they're like, Steve, we need help. We've got this family member who's going to need some assisted living or skilled nursing.
Yeah.
Walk us through the process of kind of what that looks like or what you do from start to finish.
You bet. So if I walk into a client and their family, I don't know about them. So I conduct a proprietary geriatric care assessment. I have developed a 6-page worksheet, and it has a whole bunch of questions. And I never assume that I know any of them. I need to determine our level of care, our type of care, payment method, location parameters, and any personal preferences and needs specific to you and your situation. I have to know those things. And there are a lot of other things that I ask about. I call that developing a care profile. And now I know what to look for.
And once you've got their care profile, then you'll start identifying potential places.
I research the entire marketplace and I narrow it to our top 3 communities that check all the boxes. The next step is then we're going out to take a tour of all 3 of those places. We'll go in, we'll see everything. I ask all of the questions, and we're in and out of each place in about an hour. And so it saves my clients a lot of time. To put that in perspective, we're done in 3 or 4 hours. They're completely finished. If you're trying to do your homework and you're running around looking at all these places and asking the questions, et cetera, it's very common to spend 50 to 100 hours. But when we're finished, then I produce a report that has every question asked, every piece of information discovered. I calculate their exact staffing ratios because they usually don't know their exact staffing ratios, and I really want to know that number. It's just a hard number that you can compare and contrast. I also include what's found in the most recent surprise health inspection performed by the state of Kansas or Missouri. I put a lot of weight on that, so I report that in your summary report as well, so that you're now in a position where you have a wealth of objective information on the top 3 places meeting your exact needs. And now you can make an informed decision and move forward with confidence. So the whole ballgame for me is to put you in the best position possible to make a decision you're comfortable with and then move forward with that.
So you give them what you believe are their best 3 choices. It's a huge time saver, but it's also making sure that in the end they make best choice for their loved one, right? So it's not just about saving time, it's about saving time and making the right decision.
Making the best decision you can. We all have a small number of, like, the biggest decision in our life. And this is one of the huge ones. To trust someone else to provide the most intimate of care for your mother, for your father, for your grandparent, for your spouse, you got to get that right. And you better know as much as you can about that place, about those people and their background and the way they operate and who runs it. And all of that, you just can't wing this one. You got to get it right.
For sure. And so people's options are they're fortunate enough to work with you. That takes care of it. And I guess some people just go it on their own and try and figure it out. And I know we have talked about in the past these other free services, which on the surface seem like they're similar to what you do, but they're not, right?
They're not. That's correct. If you see a company or a service advertising, and there's some huge ones out there, and they just look, wonderful and warm and everything, but you have to just get to the bottom line of it. They're free to you because they don't work for you. I mean, that's it. It's as simple as it can be. A number of these providers have agreed to pay them up to 100% of the first month's cost. So if the place you move into costs you $8,000, they're getting 90, 100% of that as a commission. That's why it's free to you. My business model is that I work directly for my clients and they pay me a reasonable flat fee for service to help them through this whole process objectively. I never received 1 penny from any of the providers out there. And that's just how I think this should be. So I call it a placement service with integrity. And I've also had some financial advisors say, well, you're taking a fiduciary type of an approach. And in a fiduciary situation, you are obligated to work in your client's best interest. You cannot receive reimbursement from the places you recommend and that sort of thing.
So these free services, the people who are willing to pay them are the
Mhm.
only people that make their list. And the people that will pay them the most are probably typically at the top of the list.
That's exactly right. So again, at the surface, it looks like the same thing as senior care consulting, but it could not be more far apart, more different than what I do. Kind of a major development that I see, more and more of these places are now kind of waking up saying, wait a minute, why are we paying out commissions when we could spend that money on our own marketing programs? There are more and more providers, when I call them up, they're like, Steve, before we get started, I don't want to waste your time. We're no longer willing to pay. And I'm like, good. And it makes me very happy because senior care consulting is not a free referral service. That's the way business should be conducted.
Interesting. So maybe the tide's starting to change a little bit for
A
the
little bit.
positive.
Yeah.
Yes.
I had an elder law attorney recently look me straight in the eye and said, Steve, why should I refer my clients to you when I could send them to a free referral service? And I said, if you refer your clients to one of the free referral services, every single time you'll have this question: did they send my client to the best place available, or did they send my client to the place where they received the highest commission? You will have that question every single time. And when you refer your clients to senior care consulting, that question does not exist. It does not exist. I get pretty fired up about that, Greg.
So are you typically dealing with a family member, like a child who's doing this for an aging parent? Or like with me, I'm getting close to being that aging parent. You deal with people like me who's like, listen, I need to find a place for myself to spare my children from having to do this at some point down the road. So what's the typical, or is there not a typical scenario?
Great question. Most of the time, frankly, I'm dealing with the adult child caring for an elderly parent or with some level of responsibility for looking after an elderly parent. Sometimes they're direct hands on caregivers and they're getting really tired and worn out and they know they just can't do that very much longer. And so typically that's the person I'm working with. But this last week, I received a call from a gentleman, and recently his wife passed away. He was the caregiver for her. She had Alzheimer's. He said, now I'm kind of on my own. And he said, I'm feeling a little vulnerable that I don't have that next step taken care of. I don't even know what that looks like. And I need you to help me with that next step. I'm not ready to move yet, but in the next 12, 18 months, maybe, he said, I'll probably be ready to move. And I want to be prepared for that. So with him and with many others, we're going out and we're looking proactively and we're getting out ahead of the curve. A lot of the best places already have a waiting list today. And so he wants to get on the wait list and then manage the timing and have that in his control so that he doesn't feel vulnerable. He knows exactly where his next step is because we've been proactively searching. We've done our homework. He's got his name on a wait list or two, and now he's got that peace of mind. And so more and more, I'm working with people who see the need for this. If we're 5 or 10 years away, we're probably a little early, unless you just want to know what's available out there. But most of the time, it's the adult children. But sometimes it's an 80-year-old spouse who's taking care of an 80-year-old spouse, and they can't do it very much longer. They're getting really tired, and they want to know what that next step looks like. So we'll go out proactively. We'll look at a place, and now they know the next step is just a matter of timing.
Right. So tell me, what is the ideal scenario? I assume it's not for somebody to wait until there's an event or a crisis and have to make a move and a decision, in a very short period of time. Although I'm sure you can handle that and have probably done that. But what's the perfect scenario?
I think if you could be proactive, I have shouted this from the rooftop and through the radio, airwaves, and everything else forever, is try to be out ahead of the need if you can, if you have that option. And most people can see this coming. They can see it coming maybe from a mile away. So if you're 2 or 3 months out, we're not too late. We're definitely not too early. Maybe upwards of 6 to 12 months. That might be kind of our sweet spot, because a lot of the best places will have a waiting list. That wait list could be 2 or 3, 5, 6 months long, maybe even longer. So we're comfortable, we're being proactive, we're doing our homework, we're going to get our name on a couple of wait lists, and then we're going to manage that wait list and when we're ready to move. But we are driving and controlling this time frame. And that's an ideal situation. And trust me, I've received a lot of calls. Steve, we're kind of kicking ourselves. We should have called you 6 months ago. Here we are. Now we're in a crisis. Hair's on fire. We need to move yesterday. How fast can you go? And I can do that too. The only issue with that is we can only consider places that have an immediate availability. And maybe there are a couple other places that if we had the luxury of a couple of months of a wait list, if we could have done that, maybe they would have been even a better fit. But we will do our best in an emergency situation. But the sweet spot, 2 or 3 months, maybe even upwards of about 12 months. If it's possible, get out, let's do our homework, let's get your name on a wait list, and then we're just going to manage the waiting list and when we're going to move. That's an ideal situation. Great question.
And you mentioned this earlier, but just to kind of recap it, you look at assisted living, skilled nursing. What would you call the skilled nursing?
I just call it long-term care. Yeah, but it's a nursing home is essentially what it is. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And are there other
Memory care. Yeah, memory care is often a little bit of a misused term out there. Memory care can be found at the assisted living level. It could also be found at that long-term care level. So memory care is just a special type of care for a resident with cognitive impairment, cognitive issues.
Got it.
So if you need the assisted living level of care that helps you get dressed and take a shower and use the restroom, they make all your meals and distribute your medication. So they help you with those activities of daily living. If you ever hear the term ADL, that's an activity of daily living, just the normal things that we take for granted. At some point, if you need help with that, that's assisted living. You could have someone needing that kind of help with memory issues. So you could have memory care at that assisted living level. And then if you needed long-term care, heavy physical care, diabetic management with insulin injection, tube feeding, wound care. So those ADLs plus that medical component, that's long-term care. Well, you could have someone needing memory care at that level as well. And so, yeah, those are the kind of the two big areas, maybe with or without memory care.
Okay. And you told me a story a while back about a situation where it was actually a real estate agent that I think came to you that had a client who was needing your service because they were getting to the point where they were going to be forced to make a move, but couldn't afford to pay for it until she had sold a home. Or what was the story? Tell me again.
Yeah. So the real estate agent listens to my radio show, and she called up. She said, I'm not even sure if you can do this or want to do this, but she was working with a lady. She had some mental challenges, the nicest lady that could be, but she needed a special type of care at the long-term care level. She didn't have a checking account. And so her Social Security showed up on like a little debit card every month. And she said, there's no cash flow here. All of her net worth is in this townhome. And she said, the big question was, your flat fee for service. She said, it's totally worth it. That's like the best money ever spent, but she can't pay you. So can we include that in the closing costs? And I said, yeah, sure. She goes, it won't be too long. Once we find her a place and get her moved in, then I'll help sell her townhome, and we'll just list that as a cost. And then you'll get a check from the title company. I'm like, I'm perfectly fine with that. No worries at all.
So you did the work before you got paid.
I did. Yeah.
Right. Right. Which not everybody will do that. We see service providers related to the sale of a home or a roof or something that needs to be repaired. That's a major expense. And some will be flexible, but there are some won't. So I think that's a pretty neat story that you were able to help them and then basically count on getting compensated after the fact. So
this realtor, she worked for a large organization, and she was totally legitimate. I was totally comfortable with that. And so it worked out great. In a couple of weeks, the townhome was sold, and I get a check in the mailbox from one of the particular title companies. I'm like, perfect, there you go. So it worked out just great. I was happy to help.
So you mentioned your radio show. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So speaking of these free referral services, I'm just one guy. And there's a huge company out there with, celebrity spokesperson, and they're all over the radio. They own the internet. How am I supposed to compete with that? Because on the surface, the services do look similar. I'm only one guy. How is one guy supposed to compete with this? So I thought if you started a radio show, I can speak to thousands of people every single week. And so I thought that was one way to leverage my knowledge and my ability to tell my story, et cetera. So in 2013, I started a radio program called Senior Care Live. And the mission of that program is to provide information, education, and resources for seniors and their caregivers. And so every single week, I'm talking about this stuff. I mean, there's so much to talk about. And I have guests on the program who are experts in their particular area. And I ask them all these questions. I let the listeners know how you can get in touch with that provider if that's something that you're interested in learning more about. And it's a really good show. It's on in Kansas City. It's on every Saturday morning at 11 o'clock on Talk 980 AM, and then Saturday afternoons at 3 on 98.1 FM. And then about a year and a half ago, the program became a nationally syndicated radio program. So now it's heard coast to coast. It's all over the place. Just added Brainerd, Minnesota, Lancaster, Kentucky, and Lubbock, Texas here in the past few weeks here. So we're just constantly adding stations, and that's pretty cool it's a nationally syndicated radio program now.
Hard to believe it's been over 10 years since you started that.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So if somebody wanted to get more information or to get a hold of you, what's the best place for them to go?
You bet. So the phone number is 913-945-2800. So they could just make a phone call. And you could also go online at Senior Care Consulting with an ING, seniorcareconsulting.com. And it's a pretty new website, lots of information there. You can reach out, you can click the email button, you can send an inquiry form, whatever you'd like to do to learn more about that. So, yeah. And then on the radio show, if you miss it, or if that's just not a convenient time, I turn that into a podcast after that weekend's broadcast, usually by Monday or Tuesday. And then if you go to Senior Care Live, Live, seniorcarelive.com, click on the podcast tab, and all the podcasts are there for you. And it's also sent out to all of the major podcast platforms as well. You can subscribe to it, download it.
Fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about some of the topics that we can dig into a little bit deeper on a future session. I know we talked the other day about there's a VA benefit, which I'm a big fan of, our veterans. And so there's a benefit for, is it in-home care that doesn't get used very much?
Yeah, most people have never even heard of this. So that's why I'm constantly talking. It's just money sitting there as a thank you to our veterans or a surviving spouse of a veteran. It's called the VA Aid and Attendance Benefit. And it's very specifically designed to help pay for the high cost of senior care. So I would love to circle back with you at some point, and maybe we could do a whole session here on how to pay for the high cost of senior care. So I can talk about Medicare, long-term care insurance, the VA Aid and Attendance Benefit, and then the big question, how do you pay for care if you outlive your assets? How are you supposed to pay for all this? And then that would fall to what's called the Medicaid program. And I could certainly break all of that down. I have some slides that you would be welcome to use that really kind of puts all this in perspective. And I'll tell you, on that VA Aid and Attendance Benefit, in Kansas City, we just happen to have the national headquarters of the VFW right downtown. They're free of charge. You don't even have to be a member of the VFW. They are there to serve veterans and their families and to help them apply for any benefits that they may be eligible for. And this is one of the big ones. So I had one of the veteran service officers from the VFW national headquarters on my radio show very recently talking about this aid and attendance benefit. So it's a big deal. And I can tell people how you qualify. You did have to serve during a period of war. I can break all of that down in another episode if you'd like. So
Yeah, I think that would be a good one. And just for my clarification, is that for people that are going to remain in their home and get the help?
you can. So it will help pay for home care. It'll help pay for assisted living or long-term care.
Hmm,
So it will
interesting.
pay for a home care provider to come into your house and help you remain independent at home, which is, I mean, that's a huge deal. I think all people should remain independent in their home as long as it's safe, as long as it's affordable, as long as it makes sense. And I talk to people about that all the time. When that's not working, and you need to consider moving to a facility, that's where my services from Senior Care Consulting can help out. But I show people all the time how to stay home and remain independent in their home. So
Yeah, and I find that interesting and admirable that you're basically saying, let's delay your need for my service for as long as possible, especially if you're a veteran and can get the help that you need in your own home. Let's do that for as long as that's a feasible option.
absolutely. I'll never forget a couple that came into the office and she started kind of crying a little bit. She said, "We don't really want to move, but my kids, they're practically forcing us to move." So look, we talked about it. What it came down to is there was a danger getting her husband, who did have dementia, up the stairs to the second story. And I said, with all due respect to your kids, they're just worried about you. But for $3,000 or $4,000, you could buy a stair lift, have it installed. Your husband could sit on this chair and go up safely to the top of the stairs, take that danger out of your house. And she had this hope in her eyes. And she said, "You mean I'm not crazy for wanting to stay home?" And I'm like, "No, no, you're not. $3,000 or $4,000 and your issues are solved." I said, "You don't need my services now. When you need them later, just call me back and I'll help you out." But I think you could stay home for a long time just by solving that one issue. And we were able to do that. So
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. Well, listen, this is again just part one of what may end up being who knows how many, 3, 4, 5 different episodes that we'll do where we kind of dig in and focus on some different areas like you talked about. But appreciate your time
yeah,
and
thank you.
look forward to talking to you soon.
You bet. Thanks, Greg. Thanks for the opportunity.